All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Wednesday, February 4th. Appreciate everybody making us here at the show part of your day. Lots of stuff that we need to get to on today's show. We'll spend some time talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll do the whole Trey Hendrickson thing one more time, at least 2 weeks, I believe, from now is when the Bengals have the option to place the franchise tag on Trey Hendrickson. There's a lot of dialogue between certainly the fan base, members of the media, whether they think the Bengals should tag and then hopefully trade Trey Hendrickson, or you just let him walk, try to get a comp pick for 27 and kind of go from there. So we'll walk through that a little bit. We'll kind of detail the Hendrickson saga one last time, and that will be really the final time until we really get more information on whether or not Cincinnati is going to be tagging him or not, that we're going to do this whole Trey Hendrickson exercise. But I did want to break that down on today's show. Also, Eugenio Suarez, a couple of more thoughts on that. Charlie Goldsmith has his Substack, Charlie's Chalkboard. He kind of did a great job breaking down how this went down behind the scenes with the Cincinnati Reds and Eugenio Suarez. Of course, Nick Craw, Brad Metter, they had to go to the Castellanis and say, hey, we got to up our payroll a little bit if we can make this happen. The Castellanis, got to give them a little bit of credit for being flexible, opening up some more funds, and ultimately they were able to bring Eugenio Suarez to Cincinnati. And I think it's becoming pretty obvious that he took a pay cut to come here, right? He could have went to Pittsburgh, could have went back to Seattle. There were some other suitors out there as well for his services, and ultimately he decides he wants to come home, which is what he classified Cincinnati as, and it's going to be a one-year, $15 million deal. So a couple of more Eugenio Suarez thoughts. Also, Peter Sudter is going to be stopping by of the Miami Redhawks basketball team. They won again last night, and I really had my fingers crossed watching that. Obviously, I wanted Miami to win, but I was like, oh, we're getting Peter on. Just would not be as fun if it was on the heels of their first loss of the season, but they stay perfect, 23-0. How about that? And we'll talk to Peter Sudter. He's had some great moments throughout the year. I think a lot of people view him as the leader of the team. I think Travis Steele certainly does there as well. The first time they played Buffalo, he hit the game-winning three in overtime. We'll ask him about that and some other Miami-related questions there as well. That's coming up in about 25 minutes, 11:30. Peter Sudter will stop by. Also, NBA trade deadline is right around the corner, and some moves are being made. And the Cleveland Cavaliers, they pull a Cleveland. They trade for James Harden, give up Darius Garland. I don't get it at all. James Harden, is he a Hall of Famer? Yes. NBA All-75 team. We understand that. Great player. Heck of a run, certainly in Houston as a scorer. But if you're the Cavs, you got a really good team. You have a championship-level team. Maybe not. But you've been building this thing for several years, getting better and better and better, and you trade your point guard for James Harden, who's, he's going to be here this year? Is he going to be here beyond this year? Great player, has had a great career, but is he a winner in the postseason? Absolutely not. Now he's going to be your point guard. I got some questions there, but shouldn't really surprise anybody. That's just Cleveland kind of being Cleveland. But we'll talk about that a little bit. Also, Frank Reich, he's going to be the next offensive coordinator for the New York Jets, which... okay, the Jets are kind of in shambles, not quite sure what they're going to do at the quarterback position, right, because they had the second overall pick, and a lot of years you can get your quarterback right there, but there isn't a quarterback that you can take second overall. Mendoza's going to go first. I like Ty Simpson, but you can't take him two. Maybe you can take him later in the first round or the second round, but the Jets are still the Jets, and it looks like they're going to have some serious issues again next year. But Frank Reich is going to be their offensive coordinator. Has been away from the NFL game for a while. Was recently the interim at Stanford when they lost their head coach, and it was kind of late in the cycle, so they went with the interim routes and didn't have much success there, but can't really blame him for that. He was put in a very difficult circumstance, but he's going to be back in the NFL calling plays for the New York Jets. Some thoughts on that there as well. But make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. On our way to 22,000 subscribers here at the channel, trying to get to that number by the time we fully get into Red Spring training here. So help us out, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Reed Mouse is out if you're just joining us for the first time this week. Off the bench is on hold temporarily. We'll get back to it at some point. I don't really have a timeline for you at this point, but we are still here each and every day, Monday through Friday, 11 to noon with my show, and we'll try to get with Reed Mouse and have him on. So I'm going to be gone from the office a couple of days next week, so we're going to have some pre-recorded shows that we do that will premiere at 11 o'clock, so it'll be as if we are still live, and we'll try to get Reed on for a segment. We'll ask him about fatherhood. We'll ask him about the latest Bengals and Reds stuff. I know everyone's dying to get his opinion on the Cincinnati Reds and the Suarez signing, so we'll try to get him on. Try to shoot to get Casey McAllister there on as well. So we'll have some pre-recorded stuff at the end of next week, so be on the lookout for that. But as always, make sure you like the stream if you haven't done so already, and go find the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. That really does go a very long way. Helps us out, helps us keep the lights on here at Chatterbox, and helps me out certainly personally as well. So if you could go do that, would greatly appreciate it. All right, but let's dive in here to the Cincinnati Bengals. And before we fully get into Trey Hendrickson, I want to spend some time talking about the Pro Bowl, which went down last night, and the news about Troy Walters, Bengals wide receivers coach. He's going to be staying here as the wide receiver coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's start with the Pro Bowl. Once you get the news that Burrow was a late addition, you flip it on, right? If you're a Bengals fan, right? T's there. Jamar's there. Both the Joes are there. Like, yeah, let's flip it on. Let's see what's going on, right? So that's what I did. And, a lot of people were killing the Pro Bowl here this morning, and certainly live as it was happening. And I understand that. I think there's some adjustments that need to be made, right? I mean, the final score was, 66 to 50-something? Yeah, 66 to 52. So the NFL, they got to shrink the quarters down because they did 15-minute quarters, and it felt like they've been playing for a good period of time. And you look up, and they're halfway through the first quarter. So got to make an adjustment there with the length. But, it wasn't the end of the world, right? There's some adjustments that need to happen. I mean, a lot of stars were still there. There was some cool plays. Obviously, it's not like what the Pro Bowl once was, but there was some tinkering that needs to be done. I thought Jamar made a couple of insane plays, and so did Joe as well. They had Jamar out there on defense a little bit. He had the one-handed interception, then housed it the other way, did a backflip. Like, that's just Jamar being an absurd athlete, and that was kind of cool to watch. I enjoyed that. Did I sit down and lock in for the full game? No. Is there holes all over the place? Yes. Is it a product that needs a lot of work? Is it still a borderline laughingstock? All those things are true, but it captured my attention for a little bit. And then Burrow obviously came in the game. They had a little, if you didn't watch, they had a little trick play where he kind of dumped it off. I think it was to Achane, and then he got it back on a pitch, and then Joe Burrow took off. And I was sitting there like, oh, God, what's going on here? Because, with Joe Burrow and his history, you kind of just hold your breath. But he absolutely took off, shot right through the defense, and Toe looked great. Really got downfield in a hurry, jumped up, spiked the football. It's kind of a cool moment. And, Flacco, to see them there with T and Joe. Would I have turned it on if the Bengals weren't there? Absolutely not. But I did. The stars were there, and there were some good moments and some entertaining moments of the game. But they got to shrink the quarters, obviously. 66 to 50, whatever. That's just a little insane. You kind of feel for Van Pelt and Orlovsky, right? You can't really call the game. Like, it's going to be kind of awkward, and the people on the sidelines, like, it's not going to be great. But I thought they did the best they could. People out there saying ban the Pro Bowl, that was kind of my mindset. Last week when you get the news that, like, Shedeur Sanders is playing quarterback, I think they saved it a little bit with Burrow coming, one of the best players in the league. He's in the Pro Bowl. Obviously, Jamar was there. Puka Nacua was there as well. So a lot of big stars did show up and play, which I think helps them. And I don't really have the viewpoint that they need to ban it anymore. They need to make some adjustments. It's not great. It's never going to be what it once was. But, to get some of the best players in the league there, Super Bowl week, I'm here for it. There were some really nice plays that I thought in the game. But the biggest takeaways were some of the things that Joe Burrow said when he had a microphone in his face. And they asked him, you could tell the mood from Joe Burrow. He was happy to be there. Right, that's the big word with Joe Burrow. Oh, is he happy? How's he doing? Is he loving what he's doing right now? He seemed pretty obviously happy, I would say, at the game. They asked him. Somebody for ESPN was like, yeah, there's been a lot of dialogue about you not being happy in the city of Cincinnati. How do you feel? And he kind of laughed and was like, yes, I love it here in Cincinnati. Said everybody has bad days. Sometimes you have a bad day when you have a press conference. So that should quell all the nerves if they were still out there from Bengals fans. Clearly Joe Burrow wants to be here. He wants to get this thing fixed and headed in the right direction. Obviously, we hope we stop seeing him play in the Pro Bowl because that would mean he's playing in the Super Bowl. That needs to happen sooner rather than later. But there was anybody out there that was still concerned about, oh, you know what, Joe Burrow, I don't know if he wants to be here. I don't know if he, was going to ask out of his contract, try to go somewhere else. That clearly is not happening anymore here at this point, which I think certainly is positive. And then someone else asked him if he looked up to any other quarterbacks, and he was like, well, not right now. I'm playing. I don't look up to anyone in the league. And that was just kind of like, okay, Joe Burrow's back, right? That was a typical Joe Burrow answer that you would get in like 21 and 22. The guy that kind of towed the line between cockiness and arrogance, something that a lot of us, really like to see out of Joe Burrow. I know me personally, when he kind of goes into that mode where it's like, yeah, he's being a little cocky right now, but we'll take it because he's going out there and backing it up on the field. Thought he showed that a little bit at times last night, and he was clearly he was trying out there. Like, you could tell that Joe and Jamar were there to make a statement. I don't know, make a statement's probably not the best way to put it, but put on a show a little bit. The first touchdown, he kind of was rolling to his right and then not looking to the left side of the end zone, and then kind of just fired it across his body. So he looked like he was having a good time out there. They made some good plays. Great to see Flacco out there as well, obviously. So I get the Pro Bowl is a bit of a laughing stock here at this point. I understand that, but I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, with how it transpired. Would I have even turned it on if Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Flacco weren't there? Absolutely not. But I did, and, it was worth it. Didn't lock in the whole time, but it was, we saw some cool moments. You got some sound bites from Joe Burrow. You saw some cool plays. Jamar do some absurdly athletic things, and you move on, right? The other news of the day yesterday for Cincinnati, Troy Walters, wide receivers coach for the Bengals, he's going to be staying put. I guess it didn't even really cross my mind the possibility that he could be leaving, which I guess is just shame on me because he's an outstanding wide receiver coach. You hear Jamar and T speak so highly of him, and Zach certainly there as well. He's been here for several years, and credit to him because I think, when you're a part of the success that he has been from a wide receiver perspective, there are some teams out there that are interested in his services as an offensive coordinator, and he had an opportunity, I believe, to interview with the Bears, and he was like, you know what, I'm good. And respect for him for doing that. I mean, obviously, if he took a play caller job offensively, right, in Chicago, it wouldn't be as a play caller, but if he took a coordinator job, that would be a significant pay raise, but he wants to see this thing through. Jamar and T are his boys, and he understands that he's got a great opportunity to be a part of a world championship here in Cincinnati, and he's going to stay. And it also got me thinking a little bit because we talk about, Brian Callahan's of the world, and would Zach promote Brad Craigthorpe, the quarterback coach, if Dan Pitcher were to leave? Well, one thing that I haven't discussed is, Dan Pitcher's going to leave inevitably at some point. It doesn't look like it's going to be this year, but next year probably, or the year after that, he will be gone elsewhere, either in a play calling role offensively or as a head coach. I think Troy Walters now becomes an option, and that's not something that I have discussed here. He's been a receivers coach forever. How would he do as a coordinator? Well, if you're a coordinator here in Cincinnati, you're not calling the plays. ZT's doing that. So I think that would be an interesting person that could potentially fill that role of Dan Pitcher if ultimately he leaves in the coming season. So do think that was interesting, and I do think it's big for the Bengals to retain Walters. And again, in my opinion, I didn't even really realize that he could potentially be leaving, which I guess, again, is kind of shame on me because he's done such a great job. And you hear Jamar and T speak so highly of him, and Zach there as well, and he clearly is a critical piece to what they're doing here offensively. And he's clearly a great coach as well. I understand the talent level for Jamar and T is just absolutely through the roof, but you need someone to kind of hold their hand throughout the beginning of their career, teach them what it means to be a professional, and clearly, find a way to get the most out of them. And I think Walter certainly has done that over the course of the past few years, and he's a huge catalyst for what the Bengals have been able to do offensively. So to keep him, obviously, is a pretty big deal. The Hendrickson stuff. So, we've gone back and forth on this. I would be shocked if he was playing with the Cincinnati Bengals next year. He's going to turn 32, I believe, in December. They kind of, said one more year. We got the band back together. The core offensively was back. Well, let's bring our star pass rusher back for 1 year. and it blew up in their face a little bit. And all the drama throughout the offseason, I'm really looking forward to not doing this throughout the entirety of this offseason, right? We're doing today's segment, and then we'll do the segments if they tag him or not tag him, and then we'll do the segment when he's no longer with the team, and then that'll be it for Trey Hendrickson. As opposed to last year, it's like every other day. It's like, well, he went to Adam Schefter and said this, so he went on McAfee and said this, so he was thinking about putting this out, and he had this, it was a Bengals practice, and he showed up to the practice but just wanted to meet with the media. We're not going to have that throughout this offseason, which certainly is nice. To recap, he comes in from New Orleans, the best free agent signing in Bengals history. Huge seasons, back-to-back 17.5 sacks, and didn't do much from a run-stopping perspective, which I do think is noteworthy. Because can Myles Murphy get to the ceiling of where Trey Hendrickson was at as far as rushing the passer? Probably not. We'll see. But he's a much more well-rounded player that can help you out against the run. And Shamar Stewart, the belief is if he can, not be a bust, that he can certainly help out against the run there as well. So that's not really Trey Hendrickson's game. And that's not really something he brought to the table. He was third down, money down, fourth quarter, big moment, get to the quarterback. That's who he was as a player. But, it felt like, this was coming to an end. And certainly when the Bengals made the decision just to give him the raise for the 1 year and not move forward with the long-term deal, the writing kind of was on the wall here. So the decision that needs to be made for Cincinnati is, do you just let him walk, or do you try to execute a tag and trade? And we've dove into this a little bit, but I do think it is fascinating to see what Cincinnati will do in this situation. Would it surprise any of us if they said, yep, we're good, hands off, let him walk, and hope to get a comp pick after that? Wouldn't surprise any of us. But I do think, and we talked about this a little bit when we were doing our mock off season, that it seems to me kind of like a no-brainer to tag and trade him. So let's kind of walk through it. If they don't do anything, they would hope to get a compensatory pick for 2027. The last time the Bengals were in this situation was with Jesse Bates, and most of us wanted him just to stay, whereas I'm sure there's some people out there that would like Trey Hendrickson to stay, but for the most part, it's like, let's do a tag and trade. Let's kind of move on here. We wanted Jesse Bates to stay. That wasn't going to happen. So their options were let him walk or execute a tag and trade. They decided to let him walk and ultimately got a third-round compensatory pick the following year. And in order for that to happen, there's some ins and outs that need to happen in order for you to get a comp pick and what round the comp pick is in. Basically, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you can't sign as many free agents in free agency as many as the players in free agency that leave your team, if that makes sense. So there's going to be a handful of free agents like Geno Stone, free agent. He's not going to be back. That counts as a guy that's a free agent on your team that you're not going to sign. That number has to be greater than the number of guys you sign in free agency this cycle. So that could potentially hamper your ability or your want to be really aggressive in free agency. But again, the comp pick would not be a 2026 comp pick. It would be a 2027 comp pick, which in my opinion, my whole philosophy is be as good as you can be right now. This isn't a rebuilding situation. This isn't a planning for the future. This is go win a Super Bowl next year. So a comp pick to me in 2027, I'm not thinking about 2027. I'm thinking about the 2026 NFL draft and how this team can get better in the short term. And again, you don't want it to hinder how aggressive you are in free agency. If you're sitting there like, well, we want to sign a couple of these guys, but we don't want to sign too many to the point where that number is higher than the guys that are free agents that are leaving our team, right? And that could, impact what round the comp pick is for Trey Hendrickson. Like that, to me, I don't want to worry about that. I'm almost at that point where it's like, don't even keep that in the back of your mind and just operate how you would in free agency, and whatever pick you get is the pick you get, right? So that's an option for Cincinnati, and I think we would all say that is the most likely option. And when you look across the league, it's not like these sign and trades are happening every single year, multiple times a year. Like they are borderline rare, I think is a fair term to use when talking about these deals. L'Jarius Sneed, the Chiefs did it when he went to Tennessee. I think that was the most recent one. Devontae Adams, that happened with the Packers and the Raiders, right? So they don't happen all the time. And when you're talking about an organization with the Bengals, it wouldn't shock any of us if it didn't happen again. Now, I am on the side of tag and trade him, right? Try to get something here for 2026. So how that would work is they have the opportunity on February 17th between then and March 4th, they can tag a guy. So they would tag Trey Hendrickson and then immediately start getting on the phone with these other teams and trying to find a deal that works for both parties, right? And the reason why a team would do this is because then they don't have to get in as big of a bidding war for Trey Hendrickson as they would if he was a free agent, right? If Trey Hendrickson is a free agent, somebody is going to overpay, and he is going to cash in big time. So it would be advantageous for a team like, I don't know, the Bears, or maybe, I don't want to say the Packers, probably not them, the Cowboys maybe as a team that would be interested in him. It would be advantageous to get on the phone with Cincinnati after a tag and say, all right, let's trade for him. That way you're not competing with everybody on the free agent market. Now, what would you get back if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? The Bengals obviously were looking for a first-round pick last year. I do believe they would have moved him if they got a first-round pick. But Trey Hendrickson, where he's at, I mean, obviously he was a year younger then. Now he's a year older. You're not getting a first-round pick. Pretty safe to say you're not getting a second-round pick either. The question is, could you get a 2026 third-round pick for Trey Hendrickson? I don't know. I think there's a chance that you could. Again, you have to understand what the market looks like in the NFL as far as free agency goes. When you look at the market as a whole, there aren't these huge names that are available free agents. I think there is pretty much a general consensus wherever you look, whether it be PFF, ESPN, The Athletic, people view the top free agent at any position in this market as Trey Hendrickson. So that, to me, says that somebody that is desperate for an edge rusher in the short term, right, would be really aggressive to try to land Trey Hendrickson, and that means they would be willing to exercise a tag and trade. And if you're Cincinnati, you're kind of taking whatever at this point. Now the question becomes, of course, what do you value? How much more value do you have in a 2026 pick than a 2027 comp pick? For example, let's say you were in a spot with Trey Hendrickson where somebody was offering a 4th or 5th round pick in 2026, but you know in the back of your head, well, I could get a 3rd round pick in 2027 if we opt to not do a tag and trade and just kind of go from there. So that's something that the Bengals are going to have to weigh and decide this offseason. Again, I'm doing whatever I can to load up on picks here in 2026. I'm not worried about 2027. That's a year, removed from where we're at now. Another full season in between now and then, right? Where who knows what's going on with the health of your team or what the team looks like, right? Obviously, Joe, Jamar, and T are still going to be here, but are they at nearly as, high of a level as they're at right now? I mean, you hope so, but at some point, they're not going to be as good. I'm not worried about 2027. I'm worried about right here in 2026. So if you ask me, a 5th round pick in 2026 for Trey Hendrickson in a tag and trade or a 3rd round pick in 2027, I'll take the pick this year. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But that's kind of just where I'm at right now personally. Now, the last part to this is if you're the Bengals, is there some worry in the back of your mind that you're in a situation where you tag him, now all of a sudden nobody has interest in Trey Hendrickson. You're like, oh, we're stuck with him here at this point. We tagged him. Then you got to pay him $30 million or something around that for what his tag would look like at this stage of his career, right? And then where do you go from there if you're the Bengals? Because that takes a huge hit to your salary cap, and now you're forced to stay with him, and things could get really, really ugly there. So there is some risk, right? Because you have to weigh out, like, okay, what's the interest level going to be from these teams across the league? How much would they be willing to give Trey Hendrickson or give us for a tag and trade? That is a question that obviously you have to answer. I don't think the Bengals would be in a bad spot. I would be shocked if they tagged him and couldn't find a trade partner. Again, you're not going to get a 1st or 2nd round pick, but nobody to give you a resource, some draft compensation for him. I would be totally shocked, but that's going to be a decision that Cincinnati has to make here going forward. And again, the deadline, or you can begin to tag guys February 17th, and that decision needs to be then made by March 4th. Is kind of your period that you're working with here if you are Trey Hendrickson here at this point. So we'll keep that something that we'll certainly continue to discuss here on the show, but we're not going to have a full-fledged Trey Hendrickson offseason like we have in previous years. All right, it is time to welcome on our guest, and he is a member of the 23-0 Miami Redhawks, and his name is Peter Sudter. Peter, what's up, man? Thanks for making some time for us here on a Wednesday.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Let's kind of just dive right in here. Obviously, you guys are having a heck of a year, 23-0, pretty remarkable. And I graduated from Miami in 2023, and I would work some of the games, and I showed up to a handful of them. And the environment at Millett Hall, there wasn't really an environment, right? There was more people on the benches than there were ultimately in the stands. What has that been like to see the university rally around you, and what's it been like to play in front of, sellout crowds at Millett Hall?
Yeah, I mean, it's super cool, obviously, having our past couple games pretty much sold out. But you can't – at the beginning of the year, it wasn't like that. Like you said, right. I mean, we built this even from last year. I know we had 25 wins or whatever it was. But Coach Steele and the coaching staff have done a great job. What we've done. Our players, we've embraced it, and it's obviously super cool. So just keep supporting us.
Obviously, you went on a run in the MAC tournament last year, and we're just kind of a play away from really punching your ticket to the big dance. And I'm sure there was a lot of other schools out there that were interested in your services this day and age, the NIL, the portal, how college sports works. What, at the end of the day, made you stay at Miami and come back for another year?
Yeah, I'm just going to say it's the culture, the guys that are here every single day, including the coaching staff as well. I mean, I had so much fun playing for Miami last year. And this year has been obviously better. It's been a blast, but definitely the culture aspect, how close we are off the court in the locker room. It's a super fun to play with your best friends, pretty much.
Part of the reason you guys are so entertaining to watch is the games that you play in are very entertaining. It's not like you're just blowing everybody out. You've been in some crazy high-scoring games that go back and forth, and ultimately you guys have been at your best in crunch time. What, in your opinion, has allowed you guys to kind of be at your best in the biggest moments?
Yeah, the connectivity for sure. But we practice it every single day. Our coach staff, they put us in situations to mimic those tough adversity situations in games. But our connectivity, our growth together, the trust we have in each other is why we're so successful in those crunch time moments for sure.
It's also really impressive that you guys have been able to do this in large part without Evan Apsaro, who was a big force on your team last year, and I think certainly coming into this year was going to be a big reason why you guys would have a lot of success. But you lose him pretty early in the year, and you've had to turn to some freshmen, Kirby and Perry. What was that like trying to replace him, and how do you think those freshmen have performed to this point?
I mean, the freshmen have been great. Every single person down our whole roster has stepped up. I mean, when something like that happens, obviously it's horrible. You never want something like that to happen to such a good player. But the way he's handled it, honestly, it made us not skip a beat. And that's the biggest part of him being a captain and the leadership. But like you said, the freshman and Luke Skowjak coming in as the point guard this year, I mean, every single person on the roster has stepped up tremendously.
You mentioned Skowjak there, and I've been really impressed with just the pace in which he plays with, how he can slow down the game and just kind of run the offense. How's that been with him as the point guard? I know a couple of games ago you actually had to be the point guard because he was out with an illness, but what's it like playing with him out there on the floor?
Yeah, his IQ's through the roof. He sees the game differently. He sees angles differently. He's amazing in the pick and roll. But he's super unselfish, and that's the biggest part about him. He can go out there, get 8 to 10 assists, and sometimes he can put 25 points on your head, like loud points. So he's an ultimate warrior and just complete animal on the court.
It's pretty cool for me when you go to ESPN and I'm trying to find your guy's schedule, and I can just, boom, click on top 25, and there it is. It comes right up. Obviously, there's got to be some element of pressure that you guys feel when you take the floor. Is that a feeling, or is it a different feeling just with that number attached to your name?
Yeah, we try not to get too caught up in the number, I would say. I mean, it's obviously super cool. You got to embrace the accolades you get and everything like that. But we take every single day, one day at a time. Our main focus right now is to just keep getting better offensively and defensively so we can play our best in March.
Nick Saban used to talk about this all the time at Alabama. When you're at the top, you're getting everybody's shot each and every week, best shot. So even if it's not, a quote-unquote good team, they're going to try to play their best, and they're going to give everything they have when they play you. Is that kind of how it feels here at Miami right now, with regardless of the opponent and what their record is, they're gunning for you?
Definitely. I mean, when we go out there on the hardwood, we're going to get everybody's best shots. It's their Super Bowl, like you said. I mean, whether it doesn't matter if you're playing the best team or the worst team, they're going to come out and give it their all because they want to beat us. So we got to understand that we are going to get everybody's best shot and just keep taking one day at a time.
How's that been on the road? Because wherever you guys are going, they're pretty big crowds there. Obviously, the Kent State crowd was tremendous. Do you like that going on the road? I'm sure it's cool to play at Millette, but is there something that kind of galvanizes you as a unit when you go out there and it's a filled-out arena and you know they all want you to lose?
Yeah, it's playing on the road's so fun.
Yeah.
It's the best in my opinion, especially when the arenas are sold out. It's your team versus everybody there, basically. That's what it feels like. So coming out with a bunch of road wins is definitely a great feeling, but you can't beat coming out to a sold-out Millette Hall as well.
In the Northern Illinois game over the weekend, you were kind of backing down a defender on the post, and then you kind of faded away and hit it off the glass there. Is that something you've been working on in your post game? Because I didn't know that necessarily was something you had in your bag.
Yeah, I would say that came from almost when I was at Bellarmine. I know they like to post up their guards there as well, so I learned some things there. But obviously, I get with my position coach, Christian Smith, every single day, and he's developed me in the post, on the perimeter, in ball screens. So huge shout out to him for developing my post game for sure.
It certainly seems like you are the leader on this team. There's several leaders, I'm sure, but upperclassman, senior, now your second year here, and clearly when Travis Steele talks about you, that's kind of how he talks about you as well. From a leadership perspective, was that difficult for you to kind of mold yourself into a leader? Is that something you've always had throughout your basketball career, or was that kind of new to you this year?
I would say it's something I've always had. When I was at Carmel High School, I believe I was a captain my sophomore year, if not definitely my junior year. And it's been like that my whole life. I mean, I just want to win basketball games. I'll take whatever it takes to win, whether it's scoring, passing, facilitating, running the offense, playing defense, guarding the best player, whatever it takes. I'm willing to win. I think that feeds off of other guys.
The first Buffalo game got to be probably one of the favorite days of your life. 37 points, game winner in overtime. Crossover on the right wing, just rose up and absolutely drilled it, and then went Steph Curry on everybody with the night. Walk us through that moment. I'm sure it was awesome. In the moment, did you know you were pulling? I assume you do or did. And what was that like in the locker room after the win?
Yeah, it was super cool, obviously, to hit a shot like that. I mean, that's one of the coolest shots I've definitely hit in my basketball career. But I mean, like you said, it's when you have that type of feeling when you're 34, 30 points, you have full confidence, and your teammates have full confidence in you. And when I got the ball, I definitely knew it was going up. It'd be better than a turnover, so you just got to get a shot on the rim, regardless. Make other dudes make a play if you do miss it. But like you said, it was super cool in the locker room to celebrate with my teammates afterwards.
Coach Steele was telling this story on the radio how a couple of years ago he was out recruiting and actually got a commitment, and then they found out that you were in the portal from Bellarmine, and then he had to call back the recruit and be like, actually, hold on, we got a guy that we're going after here in Peter. Just take us through kind of behind the scenes what it's like playing for Coach Steele. We've had him on the show. He seems like a pretty intense guy. You see him kind of get into it with the officials certainly from time to time, but what's it like playing for him, and what do you love about playing for him?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is he's a player's coach, 100%. He does such a good job at instilling confidence in your players, and making the biggest part is when people start second guessing themselves on the court. That's when people start making mistakes, having turnovers. But he gives us full trust in our abilities and our talents. So the number one thing about playing for him is just he instills confidence in us, and that's why we're so successful.
Marshall on Saturday. I know you're just on the heels of a game last night, so you probably haven't fully dove into them yet. They're a solid team. You got to go on the road once again, and they got a lot of experience as well. Any early thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, like you said, I haven't looked at them much. We'll start preparing for them tomorrow, but I'm sure I know they're a great team, and it's going to be a challenge for sure. Like you said, we're going to get everybody's best shot, so we'll be ready.
You got any favorites up there in Oxford? Any spots that you're hitting? I was always a big Doby's guy. You got any good spots for us?
I do like Doby's, but I would say my favorite spot, probably Bagel and Deli.
Oh yeah.
Bagel and Deli shop. I usually start it with the bagel in the morning.
Yeah. What's the order?
The Super Deluxe Breakfast Bagel.
Okay, there we go. I'll have to try that. Not familiar with that one. Yeah,
that's good.
Well, Peter, I appreciate you making some time for us here on a Wednesday. I know you're busy and you got a lot going on, but congratulations on all your success. Best of luck the rest of the way, and would love to do it again sometime, man. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Peter Sudter of the Miami Redhawks. They are 23-0. Pretty unbelievable. Like I said, I went to Miami. That was, 19-23, and I was working some of the games, and I went to a lot of the games, but no one else really cared in Oxford, but certainly not the case anymore, as everybody in Oxford is fired up. sold out crowds at Millett Hall, and like he was saying early in the year, it's not like everybody fully was tapped into what they were doing yet. It was definitely a process, and they got hot. The students came back from J-term, and it's been a heck of a ride ever since. But yeah, I was a little nervous watching the game last night because I knew Peter was coming on today, and the last thing I wanted was for them to finally lose a game, and then he's got to come on the next day, and we got to have a whole different conversation. But awesome win for the Red Hawks last night. And, 2-point win against Buffalo. The first Buffalo game, of course, as we were talking about, Peter hit the game winner in overtime at the night celly there, Steph Curry fashion. But that was a crazy game. And like I said, the Red Hawks have been a part of some crazy games this year. They're not just coasting to victories, right? They've been down early. I mean, the Northern Illinois game this past weekend, they were losing for the majority of that game, and then they take the lead and don't look back. And you look at the box score at the end of the game, and it seems like a pretty comfortable win, but they faced some adverse moments there in that game. And multiple times on the road, the Kent State game where it's like, oh, they're going to lose this thing, and Skowjak makes the layup there right at the very end. The Buffalo game was back and forth, so just a heck of a run. And there's always, a team like this in college basketball. If you're a fan of the sport, right, some Cinderella that has some crazy run during the regular season. We all know about the Cinderellas in the tournament there as well. And it's pretty awesome that team is right here locally in Oxford, Ohio. And they got a lot more to do. And I thought about asking Peter this, but I decided not to. I think a big conversation topic, it's funny, we were talking about this when they were like 7-0, 8-0, and now it's becoming more of a real conversation here, is what do you do if they stub their toe, right? Thought about asking them that, but decided not to. Obviously, their goal is to win every single game, run the table, and leave no questions there as it relates to that. But, they can't bottom out. Obviously, they can't lose multiple games, but like if they were to lose one game, right, whether it be in the regular season, well, I guess it would have to be in the MAC tournament because I think 2 losses, that'd probably be too much. But if they lose a game in the MAC tournament, I don't know, right? To me, they should still be in. But, I mean, you feel good about them winning the MAC tournament, but they've got some tough tests here. They still got to play OU twice, that's a rivalry game, so anything could happen there. And then Marshall this weekend on the road, like I talked about with Peter, there's a lot of experience with that team. They've got a lot of upperclassmen, a lot of guys that played a lot of college basketball, and that kind of feels like it doesn't feel like some young team's going to come in here and beat Miami. That's not going to happen. But the way Marshall is made up, I'm not predicting Marshall to win this game, but it kind of feels like it's going to take a veteran team that has seen a lot, that has played a lot of basketball, that's at home, can use that crowd to work off of. This is going to be a huge test on Saturday for Miami. I wish it was on national TV. It's just ESPN Plus. But it's been a heck of a ride to watch the Red Hawks. We'll try to get Travis Steele on again coming up here shortly. Whether it be next week or the week after. We had them on early in the year, and they were undefeated when we had them on, but now the whole country's watching, so that's pretty cool. But shout out to the Miami Red Hawks. Shout out to Travis Steele. Shout out to Peter Sudter and all his teammates. They're doing a heck of a job there in Oxford. So we came on a little bit earlier there with Peter, but kind of putting the bow on the Trey Hendrickson stuff here. They got a decision to make. They're not going to extend him, right? They're not going to give him some big contract. That's not going to happen. In fact, I would say there's no chance that happens. Do you do the tag and trade, or ultimately do you just let him walk and hope to get a comp pick? Again, some people might say it's stupid to say I would rather have a 2026 fifth rounder than a 2027 third rounder, but I'm ready to go now. I don't want to sit here and mess around and see where you're at. No, I don't have any interest in any of that. Win now mode for Cincinnati. Try to get a pick in 2026 for Trey Hendrickson. I don't care about a 2027 pick. That does nothing for me. Nothing at all, right? So, if you can't execute the tag and trade, which I think is probably the most likely outcome, they probably just don't even want to think about it, which I think is a huge mistake. Again, if it's a different market, if there's a bunch of edge rushers out there that are going to be available, maybe it's different, right? But this is a weak free agency class in general, and Trey Hendrickson is your top guy, right? And your Osai is one of the top guys this period as well. So somebody is going to want to give up an asset so they don't have to just get in a full-fledged bidding war in free agency, because that's what happens. Like, Trey Hendrickson's probably like, oh, my goodness, my time has finally come. It's a little bit later than what I wanted, but somebody is going to overpay for Trey Hendrickson if he is just available, right? If I'm the Bengals, I'm like, well, let's tag him. hope to heck that, you don't have to play him and something can work out with the tag and trade. But worst case, like, you can't figure something out, then it's like, take a 7th-round pick, right? Then you sit there and you go, wow, we got a 7th-round pick in 2026 as opposed to a 3rd-round pick. You're kicking yourself a little bit there, but you tried, right? We want aggression. What the Reds did with Suarez, aggression. I want some aggression here. You can get better than that. I don't think you're going to get backed up into a hole where nobody will give you a 3rd, 4th, or 5th-round pick. Like, that to me would be shocking. And again, 5th-round pick 2026 or 3rd-round pick in 27 and potentially could hinder how aggressive you are in free agency. To me, it's a no-brainer. And to a lot of people, it's a no-brainer. But they were in this spot before with Jesse Bates. They let him walk. But again, when that happened with Jesse Bates, yeah, they had success. They went to the Super Bowl. We understand that. But it was a little bit different. That sense of urgency wasn't as high. Because you're the Bengals, you're like, we just went to the Super Bowl. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we're chilling, right? We're going to keep going to the Super Bowl. It was year 2 of Joe Burrow, and he was hurt the previous year. Like, we're just going to keep rolling out Super Bowl appearances and playoff wins. And obviously, as we know, haven't even been back in the playoffs since 2022. So it's a little bit different. The sense of urgency is upped. You're paying all these guys now. It's not rookie deal Jamar Chase or rookie deal Joe Burrow. It's different. So I would recommend the Bengals act like it's a little bit different and try to go from there. But we'll see, ultimately, if that's the decision they make. Again, the dates, February 17th is when they can initially place the tag, and that decision must be made by March 4th. So we're going to find out here relatively quickly what's going to happen. Some more thoughts on Geno before we talk NBA trade deadline and Frank Reich here to close out today's show. Eugenio Suarez, of course, back with the Cincinnati Reds. We've been talking about it all week. Nick Kirby, Trace Fowler, Greg Sandlin, Mike Hart, all the guys are talking about it up on the channel. Check out the podcast, Chatterbox Reds. We got you covered with Cincinnati Reds baseball, and we've been talking about it too on my show as well, and we're going to continue to talk about it. But Charlie Goldsmith, friend of the show, he's got his Charlie's Chalkboard over there on Substack, and he does a great job, has for a long time, covering both the Reds and the Bengals. And he kind of took us behind the scenes a little bit with this piece that came out this morning about, how exactly this thing got done with the Cincinnati Reds. And, Nick Kroll and Brad Metter, they were in a spot where obviously they wanted to bat. They realized all the things that we were all saying, right? It's like you feel pretty good about where this team's at, considering how much money you have to work with and the nature of being a small market team. We all get that. But you felt pretty good. It's like, bring in a bat here that can hit some bombs and we'll roll the dice and see what we got. And as the offseason continued to go on, they addressed the bullpen, which they needed to do. They got some platoon guys in the outfield that have some upside, standard Cincinnati Reds moves, right? But then it kind of felt like that was going to be it, right? They missed on Schwarber. Austin Hayes left. They didn't execute on a Luis Robert deal. So it kind of felt like, we'll just kind of roll it back with what we had last year with some adjustments to the bullpen and some new guys out in the outfield and see how it goes. Well, that obviously didn't end up happening as Nick Kroll, Brad Metter, they went to the Castellinis and they were like, we got to up this thing a little bit, right? We need about $10 million extra dollars. They had about $5 million. I'm estimating here, about $5 million to work with. So there were some names out there that they could get for $5 million to come in and be that bat, but nobody that we would have gotten excited about. And they went to ownership and they were like, dude, we're looking for Geno, right? And we need about $10 million extra dollars in order for it to happen. And, I think this is we all talked about, we used the phrase hometown discount with Kyle Schwarber, right? And obviously he ended up not being a thing, but Geno took a hometown discount. Right, he could have went to Pittsburgh for more. He could have went back to Seattle where he had played several years, had success in the postseason for more. But he was like, no, I want to come back here to Cincinnati. And he talked about it yesterday when he was talking with the media. He was like, yeah, it wasn't about the years. It was about, they're going to treat me fairly as far as compensation for this year, and I'm going to be back home. It's home for my family. And I'm coming back to Cincinnati. And that's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. I don't blame him. Right? I kind of would do the same thing. But, when you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars, would you take $15 million here? Or would you take a 2-year deal that's going to pay you more than that after that? It's hard to say no to the money, right? But that's what Geno did. And he's going to be back, and you got to give credit to the Castellinis, which that doesn't feel right saying out loud. But, they adjusted a little bit, and they offered up some more space, and they, provided some funds that we all knew they had to go get Eugenio Suarez, right? And, when you were looking at some of these projections, right, there was it was like 3 years, $69 million, I think is what The Athletic was saying, and like 2 years, like $48 million, I think is what ESPN said, something significantly higher than what he went for. And then as the offseason continued to go, it became pretty obvious that Eugenio's not going to get that, because of all the strikeouts and how he has declined defensively. So you're going to get kind of a team-friendly deal for a guy with a lot of upside that has a lot of home run hitting production. And Cincinnati, credit to him, they jumped all over it. They took advantage of him wanting to be here, right? If this was just any player that had no connection to the Reds, he's not taking the 1 year, $15 million deal. But in his eyes, he's going to come here, hit a bunch of home runs, and then hopefully for him, make more money throughout the rest of his career. But clearly he wanted to be here. And I just think it's kind of funny because it's kind of a full circle moment when we were talking about the hometown discount for Kyle Schwarber. But really, you kind of get Gino Suarez on a hometown discount, right? Even though this isn't his hometown, but technically, but it's kind of, he views it as home, and that's what he said when he was addressing the media there yesterday as well. So we kind of did the exercises. Where's he going to be? They're going to want him to be the DH. He's going to be asked to play first and third a little bit. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, you look at the metrics, and obviously it's gone down, but I wasn't watching Seattle, right? I don't know exactly how he looked. I remember when he was here in Cincinnati, it was like, he looks fine, right? He wasn't Scott Rowland down there at third base, but it was fine. It'll be interesting to see how much he has declined there defensively when he's inevitably out on the field. But you got to give credit to the Reds for making some room, the Castellinis being a little bit flexible, and for Brad Metter and Nick Krall to go out there and do it. And now, we all make fun of Nick Krall. He's not working with the most here. He's not, Howie Roseman in Philadelphia as far as the resources he's got. But you take a look at what they've done this offseason. Obviously, they went a little bit over budget with $10 million bringing in Suarez. But you got to tip your hat because the Reds did their job this offseason. And I'm hesitant to give them an A. Feels more of a B, B+. But it also feels like they significantly exceeded expectations, right? We'll see how the bullpen acquisitions work out, right? If they blow up in your face and these guys are giving up hits and runs left and right, we're going to all be ticked off. But that's just Major League Baseball, right? When your bullpen stinks, the fan base is in shambles, right? That's just kind of part of it. But we'll see how those, signings and deals work out. We'll see what we can get from a Dane Myers and a J.J. Bleday. Can they tap into, any of their previous success that happened a couple of years ago? I think defensively you feel good about what Dane Myers can bring, and there's some pop upside with J.J. Bleday. Can he bring that back to the table? Because if he's hitting home runs for this team too, Benson's going to hit a few. He'll be up and down, I'm sure. I think he's got an option left, but he'll spend some time in AAA, spend some time up here. When he's up here, he'll hit some home runs. He'll strike out a lot. But I'm okay with the way the game is changing. That I like guys to get hits and get on base, and there's a couple of red legs that are going to do that for you. But, I'll trade some strikeouts for some home runs, right? And that's clearly what Cincinnati's going to be doing here with the meat of their order being Ellie and Suarez. You're going to see a lot of strikeouts. So, some of these games might be going by pretty quickly, right? Because you're going to see some home runs, you're going to see some strikeouts, and there's going to be, fast-paced games. But, I think we all should be excited about Suarez, of course, coming back to the city of Cincinnati, and got to give credit for the front office, what they've been able to do, and we'll see what it culminates into here at this point. And one other thing, talk about a full circle moment. When the Reds shipped off Eugenio Suarez and Jesse Winker, that kind of officially began the rebuild, right? And, people cover the team talking about how everyone was kind of in shambles when it happened. Everyone was down, depressed. One, because the writing was on the wall that they were selling and just building for the future. The rebuild was underway. And two, how important and liked Suarez and Winker were at that point. And it is kind of funny that when the move happened, everyone thought that Winker was kind of the get, right? But that's not the case. It was Suarez, right? And now he's back. So just kind of, he was the piece that got shipped off during the rebuild. Full circle. Now he's the last piece to a team that's trying to contend, right? Is that fair to say? It's kind of what it feels like right now. So pretty exciting stuff there, and hopefully it works out. But the vibes are good. We know this with Suarez being back in town. All right, a couple more things before we get out of here. NBA trade deadline. So lots going on. It's funny. Is the NBA trade deadline as good as it once was? No, I just think this day and age of the NBA with all the aprons, right, it's just so difficult to understand value of some of these players, and you're just seeing less deals go down. I think it's fair to say that. But a couple of big ones that have gone down, and one of which involving the Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about that one really quickly. So the Bulls, they're in purgatory, right? We know this. We understand this. Just kind of fighting for the play-in is kind of where they're at, and it's like, yeah, they're fighting for the play-in. They get in, and the Heat beat the crap out of them. Is basically what their seasons have looked like the past few years. And this day and age in the NBA, teams are so willing to fire their coaches, but Billy Donovan's been here for several years, and he hasn't really done much. And they've had different iterations of opportunities to win. They had some solid teams with Zach and DeMar, and then they move off those guys. They're in Sacramento, and they're on the worst team in the league. But it kind of felt like they've been rebuilding a little bit here, still keeping Vucevic before yesterday and trying to work around that. And it became clear that there's some more rebuilding that needs to be done. And ultimately, they move off of Vucevic, their center, and he's going to Boston, which I think is interesting. We'll talk about the Boston element there in a second. But they get Jaden Ivey, who a lot of us liked out of Purdue. Kind of as his career, I think he was a top 5 pick. Has his career necessarily panned out that way? No, but high ceiling guy, change of landscape for him, right? An opportunity to go play elsewhere. So that's intriguing. And then Anthony, you get him from Boston there as well. And I just think when you're talking about basketball, the two guys that run basketball right now are Sam Presti and Brad Stevens. Those guys are absolute geniuses. If you remember when we did our NBA predictions right before the season, I sat up here and I was like, Boston's going to be good this year. I understand Tatum's out. Boston's going to be good. Look at them. They're a playoff team, and you could convince me that they win the East. Crazy as that is to sound. I know what Detroit's doing. I understand that. Obviously, there's some upside with some of these other teams. Cleveland, maybe. Talk about them in a second. Philly kind of has fallen off a little bit. But there's, you could certainly put Boston up there, right? In the way that they've had to insert Pritchard into the starting lineup. He's been tremendous. Their guard play is great. We understand Jaylen Brown. They were just kind of lacking a big. And Vucevic in Chicago was kind of asked to be one of their best players. And that didn't work out, and that was very frustrating for a lot of Bulls fans. But with the Celtics, that's not really his role, and he's a big. It's exactly what they need, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he has tremendous success in Boston, right, with that role. So I thought it was a great move from Brad Stevens, and from a Bulls perspective, it was a guy that you wanted to move off from. You had to go in a different direction. You did that. Now, if you're Chicago, you look at their roster, and you're like, well, you got no bigs, right? You just got a bunch of guards. So I would imagine they're going to make some more moves at this point. Kobe White, is he a player that's going to get moved? Maybe. Dosunmu, does he get moved? Potentially. But they're not really in a spot right now where they have a complete team, right? They don't have bigs, so they got some work that they got to do. But I thought that was a good deal for both sides, right? Because Boston gets exactly what they needed. They had some guards they could afford to get rid of Anthony, and they needed a big, and they got him in Vooch. And he's not a great player, but he's been an all-star before, so that kind of checks off a big box for them. Now you get to the Cleveland side of things, and I think, as I mentioned, more moves are coming for Chicago. But Cleveland, it was kind of a couple years ago like a feel-good story for the Cavs, and it's like, wow, they're winning all these games in Cleveland without LeBron. What's going on here? And then the expectation level got really high, and they had the 1 seed, right, and they won all these games, and you're like, this is one of the best teams in the NBA, and ultimately they weren't able to execute and get to the conference finals and make a ton of noise in the playoffs, and they're kind of opting to fully hit the panic button here, which I don't understand at all. Darius Garland is a heck of a basketball player. I understand he struggled a little bit shooting the ball, and he struggled with injuries there as well. But you've built something here in Cleveland, right, with Mobley, right? You bring in Donovan Mitchell. I know you didn't draft him, but he feels like a Cav, right, here at this point. And you brought Garland was your guy too, and you were building something that you thought you could have success with long term. And then they just said, we're going to panic and trade for James Harden, which I do not understand at all. James Harden, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is a Hall of Famer, NBA top 75 all-team, whatever the heck it's called. One of the best players to ever play. Obviously, people remember him as the sixth man for a couple of years with those Thunder teams with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. But his run in Houston as a scorer, won an MVP. I mean, you could pretty much book him for 50-plus at one point in his career. Crazy it is to sound. Look it up. He was scoring left and right. Unstoppable. But it never equated to him winning in the postseason and having success there. And the past couple of years, it's just been kind of, right? And I don't want to use the term cancerous, but has he been the best teammate, right? You see him out at the clubs having a good time. Does he really value winning? He's still looking for that ring, right? But you look at that Brooklyn team with him, Kyrie, and KD, and for as bad as they were, like, that is ridiculous. They had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and they were putrid, right? And the Nets, of course, are still paying for that, right? As you look at their team, they're one of the worst teams in the NBA. But that, to me, is absurd how badly that went. He spent some time in Philly. That didn't work out. He's in L.A., which I never understood why there were so many people this year like, oh, the Clippers are going to be good. No, they're not going to be good. They're all 40 years of age, and they started the season horribly. They've gotten a little bit hotter here of late, but they got the drama with the Kawhi stuff and the owner paying him under the table. Like, they're kind of in shambles, and we all know the Lakers run L.A., right? So he was never going to really have success there. But you just kind of look, and he's what, 37, 36, 38, somewhere in there? The light's at the end of the tunnel for James Harden here. And I get from his perspective, like, he's trying to get a ring. Like, that's the last thing he needs is a ring. And he's not going to get a ring as the best player on the team, obviously. He's more of a role facilitator guy at this point in his career. But I just don't get it from Cleveland. But I do because it's Cleveland, if that makes sense. It's funny because we make fun of the Browns a lot, and rightfully so, but the Cavs got some of those same tendencies there. And this, to me, is just a Cleveland move, right? You're going to move off a guy, one of your guys, Garland, young player, has a lot of upside. I understand he's been struggling to stay healthy and shoot the rock recently, but you can win with DG as your point guard. And then you're like, we want 37-year-old James Harden, who we don't even question if he really wants to play basketball anymore, and certainly is a shell of the player he once was. So I really don't understand that at all, but it's the Cleveland Cavaliers. What can you say? Giannis, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I don't know necessarily if he's going to get moved. Part of me says no, right? Because his market, he's not going to play for the Bucks next year. We understand that. But if you're one of these teams, like if you're trading for Giannis, and it's kind of like with the Bengals with Trey Hendrickson, right? Where it's like, well, we know that the player has interest in not being here and potentially open to playing elsewhere, but we're going to ask for a heck of a lot. And that's what Milwaukee's doing, and rightfully so. Say what you want about Giannis. He's one of the best players in the league, multiple-time MVP, world champion obviously there as well. So this isn't just some scrub here that we're talking about. This is Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I think Golden State is the team that makes the most sense because if you're New York, feels like you're close. How would that work with Brunson? I'm not quite sure that would work. Brunson's a guy that needs the ball in his hands. So does Giannis. Could they play together? I don't know. Because there's some guys like LeBron, like everybody can play with LeBron, right? Other KD, everybody can play with KD, right? But Giannis, I don't know if it's like, well, he's a great player. Everybody can play with Giannis. I don't know. He needs the ball a lot. I don't know if him in New York would work. And, again, you're giving up multiple pieces in order to get him. Another team that stands out certainly would be the Golden State Warriors. But if you're Dunleavy, you got to be careful because you can move off of anybody on that roster, but you better not move off Draymond Green. And I heard his press conference from yesterday where he was kind of not open to the idea of being moved, but he's like, if this is it was one heck of a run. I do understand that. And I'm like, I don't know how that's going to play out long term or over the next few years for you and Steph Curry if you move off Draymond Green. I don't know. That seems like that's something I wouldn't want to do if I'm Golden State. And then the question is, can you obtain Giannis without moving off of Draymond Green? I don't know, right? I think if Jimmy Butler is healthy, right, then it's kind of a no-brainer, right? Then you move Jimmy, and Jimmy was having fun. You still wonder last year if Steph hadn't gotten hurt in that playoff series last year. They had no chance without him. I'm a Steph Curry guy, I will admit, but part of me is like, if they would have had fully healthy Steph out there with Jimmy Butler, they may have been able to make more of a run in the playoffs, but that was the hammy, I think, and then that was it. They didn't have a chance. Believe that was against Minnesota. But that one's interesting to me because, like, Butler's hurt, and it's like, yeah, you'll get rid of Pods if you're the Warriors and Kuminga, but they've been trying to get rid of Kuminga forever. Nobody really wants him. So, and then you could give up all the picks in the world to Milwaukee, which, I think that'd be interesting for Milwaukee. To me, it's not so much the players you would get in return. Obviously, you got to field a roster, and you got to put a lineup out there on the floor. But I think stockpiling picks this day and age in the NBA, again, with these aprons about how much you can spend and how penal that can be if you go over that. Like, look at the Celtics. Like, they were in a spot where they were like, well, we got to get rid of Porzingis. We got to get rid of these other players there as well, just because they were so far over the apron. Now, luckily for them, they got Brad Stevens, and he knows what the heck he's doing, and they still have a really good team. But it doesn't usually work out like that. But look at a team like the Thunder. Now, it's unfortunate for the NBA because, we talk about the Reds being a small market. The Thunder are a small market. If I'm a basketball fan, like, I enjoyed watching the Thunder. Watching those guys go out there and defend with Caruso, and Shea is unbelievable. Is he a free throw merchant? You can make that argument, but he's the MVP. Like, he's a heck of a player. And they've had all these picks that they were able to turn into these good players, and guess what? They have a heck of a lot more picks still coming down the pipe. So, stockpiling on picks this day and age of the NBA, I think, is a recipe for success, and that's what I would be trying to do if I'm Milwaukee. I'm like, just give me all the first you can, and I don't really care what players you send me. I'm just looking for first-round picks because Milwaukee's not going to win anytime soon without Giannis, right? It's going to take – this thing's got to bake for a couple of years. And if you're the Warriors, you're in a spot where it's like, well, Steph – we appreciate him staying here the past couple of years, not making a stink of who we are, wanting to be a Warrior for life. We love that. Let's do right by Steph. He's one of the best players of all time. You can make the argument he should be on the Mount Rushmore, right? And I'm talking up there with them ones, like Kobe and Mike and LeBron and, Kareem. Like, legitimately one of the best players ever. We all know he's the best shooter of all time. Like, I think if you're Golden State, you got to give him all you got here, and then when he's done, you're going to stink for 5 years, and then you kind of go on from there. But it's going to look totally different. Kerr's going to be gone too, right? So, like, trading for Giannis, I totally get if you're the Warriors, but can you pull that off without giving up Draymond Green is the big thing, and I don't know if that's going to be possible, but that's something that certainly people need to consider here over the course of the next few weeks. We'll save the Frank Reich stuff tomorrow. Frank Reich going to be the new offense coordinator, play caller for the New York Jets. They're in shambles. They're the Jets. We know this. We understand this. Aaron Glenn, I would have fired him. I'm not usually a fan of the one and done, but if there was a time to do it, it'd be Aaron Glenn. Like, he's a defensive guy. That's why they hired him. Their defense was horrible. They got a lot of picks, but who's their quarterback? You could put Lamar Jackson on that team, and they're not going to win many games. Like, it's just, I don't know. It seems like they're destined to always stink. But Frank Reich's got a heck of an uphill battle. They don't have many pieces offensively. We'll see what they do in the draft. But feels like that regime is going nowhere fast in New York. But we'll talk about that a little bit there tomorrow. More NBA stuff tomorrow as well. Try to get a guest on either tomorrow or Friday. And again, next week, towards the end of the week, we won't technically be live, but we'll premiere the show on YouTube, so it'll be as if we're live, and we'll try to get Reed Mouse on and or Casey McAllister there as well. I know Elliott was in the chat. He works during these hours. I know a lot of people are interested in getting him back on, seeing him. So with them not being live, I could potentially do a recorded segment with Elliott there as well. So that could potentially be in the cards. But appreciate everyone as always. Appreciate Peter Sudter for stopping by. That interview will be out later today, and also that Bengals segment will be out later today there as well. But appreciate everyone as always. And until tomorrow, take care, everybody.